The massive conference hall of the Galactic Science Center buzzed with activity. Hundreds of alien species filled the room, their bodies ranging from crystalline structures that sparkled under the soft purple lights to floating gas clouds that changed colors with their emotions. Dr. Sarah Chen stood backstage, checking her presentation slides one last time while trying not to laugh. "Dr. Chen, you're scheduled to present in 10 minutes, chirped her AI assistant through her earpiece. The Universal Translation System has been calibrated for all 273 species present today. Sarah nodded, straightening her formal blue suit. At 35, she was one of Earth's youngest leading reproductive biologists, and definitely the first human to present at the 47th Galactic Conference on Species Perpetuation. She watched through the semi-transparent curtain as a Zorblaxian finished their presentation on spore-based reproduction in methane atmospheres. The audience's reactions were polite but subdued. After all, spore reproduction was common among many species. Sarah's fingers tightened around her tablet. What she was about to present would be anything but common to this crowd. "And now," announced the conference moderator, a tall being made entirely of shifting geometric patterns, "we welcome our next speaker from the newly discovered planet Earth. Please welcome Dr. Sarah Chen, who will present on binary reproductive methods of humans." The room grew quiet as Sarah walked onto the stage. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. A few gaseous beings in the front row changed from their normal green to a curious yellow. She could see several crystalline entities vibrating with interest, their facets catching the light. "Thank you for having me," Sarah began, her voice clear through the universal translators. "Today, I'll be discussing how humans reproduce. But before I begin, I should warn you. What you're about to learn might challenge everything you know about species continuation." A ripple of movement went through the audience. A group of quantum reconstructors, beings who reproduced by splitting their atomic structure, leaned forward in their seats. Their glowing antennae twitched with anticipation. "Humans," Sarah continued, pulling up her first slide, "are a species with sexual dimorphism. This means we have two distinct biological sexes that contribute to reproduction." The reaction was immediate. The gaseous beings in the front row turned a shocked orange. Someone in the back, probably from the 17-gendered Quatuorticin species, made a sound like shattering glass. "Only two," called out a voice from the middle of the hall. "How do you maintain genetic diversity with such limitations?" Sarah smiled. She had expected this question. "That's actually one of the most fascinating aspects of human reproduction. You see, our method, while seemingly simple, creates endless possibilities for genetic combination." She clicked to the next slide, showing a basic human anatomy diagram. The entire HiveMind collective section of the audience rippled like a disturbed pond. 3 delegates from the Spore Seed Federation started rapidly taking notes, their tentacles moving so fast they blurred. "But perhaps the most unique aspect," Sarah said, building up to her key point, "is that human reproduction involves a complex mix of biological, emotional, and social factors. Unlike many species here, we don't reproduce through purely mechanical or chemical processes." The room erupted in murmurs. A crystalline being in the front row developed a small crack from shock. The quantum reconstructor's antennae were now glowing so brightly they nearly matched the stage lights. Sarah couldn't help but grin. She was only getting started, and already the audience was more engaged than she'd seen them all day. If they were this shocked by the basics, she couldn't wait to see their reactions to the rest of her presentation. "Now," she said, clicking to her next slide, "let me explain how humans select their mates." Dr. Sarah Chen clicked to her next slide, showing a diagram of human courtship behaviors. The universal translators in the conference hall started making strange buzzing sounds as they tried to process what she was explaining. "In human reproduction," she continued, "two individuals often start with a ritual called dating. This involves sharing meals, engaging in entertainment activities, and getting to know each other before deciding to mate." A loud pop echoed through the hall as the first universal translator gave up and shut down. The quatorticin delegate who owned it started changing colors rapidly, a sign of extreme confusion in their species. Are you saying, a floating gas cloud being raised what appeared to be a tentacle, that humans spend time and energy on activities not directly related to reproduction, just to choose a mate? Exactly, Sarah replied with a smile. Sometimes humans date multiple potential partners before finding the right one. This process can take years. Another translator exploded in a small puff of smoke. The crystalline beings in the front row were now covered in tiny cracks from their growing shock. Years, shouted someone from the back. The entire life cycle of my species is only 6 months. Sarah moved to her next slide, showing a human wedding ceremony. Many humans also participate in a formal binding ceremony called marriage, where they promise to stay with one mate for life. The hive mind collective representatives all fell out of their chairs at once. Their synchronized thoughts couldn't process the concept of individual pair bonding. 3 more translators gave up and shut down. But here's where it gets really interesting, Sarah said, changing to a slide about human pregnancy. Once mating is successful, the human female carries the developing offspring internally for approximately 9 months. The rapid cycle spore seeders, who reproduced in just 3 minutes, started making high-pitched whistling sounds of disbelief. One of them fainted, their spores creating a small cloud that made nearby delegates sneeze. During this time, Sarah continued, ignoring the chaos, the female's body undergoes significant changes to support the growing offspring. She showed a time-lapse video of a human pregnancy. The entire room went silent, then erupted in questions. The female's body expands DA8 much. How does she move? Is this some kind of parasitic invasion? Where is the protective shell? Why don't they just bud like normal species? Sarah raised her hands for quiet. And after 9 months, through a process called birth, she didn't get to finish. The main conference translator system overloaded and shut down with a loud bang, leaving the room in temporary silence. The backup systems kicked in after a few seconds. Sorry about that, Sarah said, trying not to laugh. Should I continue with the birth process explanation? A small being made entirely of light stepped forward. Dr. Chen, are you telling us that humans choose to reproduce this way when they could have evolved something simpler, like mitosis or quantum splitting? Yes, Sarah replied. And our method has worked quite well for us. Humans have spread across Earth and are now reaching for the stars, all thanks to our unique reproductive system. The light being flickered rapidly, their species equivalent of a headache. In the back of the room, the conference organizers were frantically trying to requisition more backup translators, knowing they would need them. Now, Sarah said, pulling up her next slide, let me explain about human puberty and hormones. The entire quantum reconstructor delegation simultaneously phased out of reality for a few seconds in shock, something their species only did in extreme situations. When they reappeared, they all had their note-taking devices ready. This was turning out to be the most interesting presentation they'd ever witnessed. Dr. Sarah Chen took a sip of water, hiding her smile as she watched the conference technicians install the 5th backup translator system. The previous 4 had shut down trying to explain human hormones and puberty. She was about to start the section on human courtship behaviors, and she knew this would be even more interesting. Now let's talk about how humans show interest in potential mates, she said, clicking to her next slide. One common behavior is called flirting. A tall, purple alien with 8 eyes raised all of its tentacles. Please define this flirting. Flirting is when humans use subtle behaviors to show romantic interest, Sarah explained, like making eye contact, smiling, or using specific body language. The 8-eyed alien started writing frantically in its notebook. Fascinating. So humans don't just release mating pheromones and wait for a response. No, Sarah replied. In fact, humans often use something called pickup lines to start conversations with potential mates. She displayed some common pickup lines on the screen. The universal translator struggled for a moment before converting them. Are you from outer space? Because you're out of this world. Do you believe in love at first sight, or should I walk by again? Are you a magnet? Because I'm attracted to you. The Hive Mind Collective began buzzing in confusion. One of their representatives spoke up. These statements are clearly false. The potential mate is not from space, and humans don't contain magnetic properties. Why use incorrect information during mating ritual? Sarah tried not to laugh. It's meant to be humorous. Humans often use humor during courtship. Humor during mating. Several species shouted at once. 3 more translators sparked and died. But wait, Sarah continued. There's more. Humans also show affection through a behavior called kissing. She played a short, very basic video showing a simple kiss. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. The crystalline beings developed even more stress cracks. The gaseous aliens turned deep purple with shock. The quantum reconstructors accidentally quantum tunneled through their chairs. They touch food intake orifices. Someone shrieked, "Voluntarily." For pleasure. Another added, sounding faint. The 8-eyed alien was now writing so fast its notebook caught fire. A helpful conference robot rushed over with a fire extinguisher. Humans also hold hands, Sarah added, showing another image. And hug. What is this? Hug? Asked a floating orb of light. It's when humans wrap their arms around each other as a sign of affection. The orb flickered rapidly. They constrict each other. And this doesn't trigger their defense mechanisms. No, Sarah said. Most humans find it comforting. A small alien in the back stood up. It looked like a walking plant with bells for ears. Dr. Chen, are you saying that humans require physical contact, emotional connection, and verbal communication just to begin the mating process? Yes, Sarah confirmed. And that's just the beginning. Many humans date for months or even years before deciding to mate. The plant alien's bell started ringing in distress. The Hive Mind Collective was now rebooting individual members who had crashed from information overload. But the 8-eyed alien raised a shaking tentacle. What about efficiency? What about logical selection based on genetic optimization? Sarah smiled. Humans found that emotional bonds and physical attraction often lead to stronger family units and better offspring care. The entire auditorium fell silent as they processed this information. In the quiet, someone could be heard whispering, "Maybe. Maybe that's why they're so adaptable as a species." Sarah nodded, changing to her next slide. Now let me tell you about human weddings. The backup translator system immediately burst into flames. The conference hall had turned into a battlefield of ideas. After Dr. Sarah Chen's presentation on human courtship and mating, the alien scientists couldn't contain themselves any longer. The moderator, still trying to maintain order, had given up stopping the debate that erupted. "This is absolutely ridiculous," shouted a quantum reconstructor, its body glowing bright red with frustration. "Any species that spends so much time and energy on reproduction should have died out ages ago." A floating gas cloud changed its color to deep blue, showing agreement. "Exactly. My species simply splits into 2 every 3rd rotation of our binary stars. Simple. Efficient. No time wasted on these. Dates, and kisses." Sarah stood calmly at her podium, watching the chaos with amusement. The conference organizers had finally given up on the universal translators and handed out personal translation devices instead. But wait, interrupted a small crystalline being, its surface sparkling with excitement. "Maybe there's something we're missing. Humans have achieved space travel, created complex societies, and produced incredible art, all while using this seemingly inefficient reproduction method." The room grew quiet as they considered this point. Dr. Chen called out the 8-eyed alien who had been taking notes all session. "You mentioned humans can reproduce at any time of the year, not just during specific astronomical alignments." "That's correct," Sarah replied. "Humans aren't limited by seasonal cycles." This caused another uproar. The spore seeders, who could only reproduce during their planet's triple eclipse, looked particularly offended. And Sarah continued, raising her voice slightly. Human females can carry multiple pregnancies in their lifetime. Some humans have many children over many years. A beam made entirely of magnetic fields suddenly collapsed and had to be reactivated by its colleagues. When it came back online, it immediately started calculating something on its datapad. But the resource cost, protested another alien. This one looking like a walking tree. The energy required for 9 months of internal offspring development must be enormous. Sarah nodded. Yes, it requires significant resources, but this investment leads to stronger parent-child bonds and better survival rates for our young. The plant-like alien's leaves started trembling. You mean, you don't just leave your offspring in nutrient pods and hope for the best? No, Sarah explained. Human parents typically spend years caring for and teaching their children. Years? Several species shouted in unison. The 8-eyed alien raised all its tentacles again. Is this why humans have such complex brains? Because of all this parental investment. Before Sarah could answer, a member of the Hive Mind Collective floated forward. Our preliminary analysis suggests that human reproduction, while seemingly chaotic and inefficient, might actually be a key factor in their rapid evolution and adaptation capabilities. The room burst into excited discussions. Different species huddled together, comparing notes and theories. The quantum reconstructors were doing complex calculations about energy efficiency versus evolutionary advantages. Think about it, continued the Hive Mind member. Their method creates strong social bonds, encourages knowledge transfer between generations, and promotes genetic diversity through mate selection. A small robot in the corner, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. Query: could this explain why humans have developed such complex emotional and social intelligence compared to other species? The entire hall fell silent again, processing this new perspective. Even the most skeptical aliens seemed to be reconsidering their initial reactions. Sarah smiled and pulled up her next slide. Now, would you like to hear about how humans raise their young? The conference organizers quickly started distributing backup translation devices, knowing they would need them all. Dr. Sarah Chen pulled up images of human art on the giant screen, paintings, sculptures, and architecture from throughout history. The alien audience stared in confusion at first, wondering what these had to do with reproduction. These, Sarah explained, pointing to the images, are all connected to human mating and reproduction. How? Asked the crystalline being, its surface now covered in tiny question mark patterns. Many humans created art to attract mates, Sarah said. The most famous artists, musicians, and builders often had multiple potential partners. The 8-eyed alien, whose notebook was now on its final pages, waved its tentacles excitedly. Are you saying humans build entire structures just to impress potential mates? Sometimes, Sarah nodded. The Taj Mahal, one of our most beautiful buildings, was built by a human male as a monument to his mate. Several aliens fainted at this revelation. The quantum reconstructors, who reproduced by simply splitting themselves, couldn't understand using so many resources just for attraction. But there's more, Sarah continued. Human reproduction influenced our entire social structure. Family units led to villages, then towns, then cities. She showed a map of Earth's cities at night, glowing with lights. The gaseous aliens turned a bright yellow color of surprise. All this development, because of reproduction? Asked the floating orb of light. Partly, yes. Humans build homes to raise families. They create schools to teach their young. They develop medicine to keep their mates and offspring healthy. The Hive Mind Collective representatives were buzzing with excitement. This explains so much about human progress. Their reproduction method literally shaped their civilization. Sarah clicked to her next slide, showing human technological advances. Even our technology was often driven by reproduction-related needs. Better farming to feed families. Better transportation to find mates. Better communication to stay in contact with loved ones. The robot in the corner spoke again. Analysis. Human reproduction method created constant motivation for species improvement. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Our way of reproduction gave us something unique, the drive to make things better for our mates and offspring. A small alien that looked like a walking plant raised its leaf. But what about space travel? Surely that wasn't related to reproduction. Sarah smiled. Actually, many humans dream of their children reaching the stars. We push our boundaries not just for ourselves, but for future generations. The entire room fell silent, processing this information. The spore seeders, who simply released spores into the wind and never knew their offspring, seemed particularly thoughtful. And here's something else interesting, Sarah added. Human parents pass down not just genes, but knowledge, culture, and dreams to their children. Each generation builds on what came before. The eight-eyed alien's tentacles were shaking with excitement. So your reproduction method isn't just about making new humans. It's about advancing your entire species. Now you're getting it. Sarah nodded. What seemed inefficient actually gave us incredible advantages. The quantum reconstructors, who had been skeptical throughout the presentation, finally spoke up. We must revise our initial calculations. The energy cost of human reproduction appears to be offset by massive technological and social gains. The conference hall erupted in excited discussions. Different species were comparing notes, running calculations, and reconsidering everything they thought they knew about efficient reproduction. Sarah watched them with satisfaction. She still had one more surprise for them: how human reproduction had influenced their emotional development and problem-solving abilities. But that could wait for the next part of her presentation. First, she needed to let them recover from this revelation, and maybe get some more backup translators ready. Dr. Sarah Chen's presentation had reached its most important part. The backup translators were all in place, and the repair robots stood ready for any mechanical failures. The alien audience, which had been skeptical at first, now sat in complete attention. "Let me show you something amazing about human children," Sarah said, displaying images of human babies learning to walk. Unlike many species, our offspring are completely helpless at birth. The rapid cycle spore seeders muttered in confusion. Their young were ready to photosynthesize within minutes of sprouting. "This looks terribly inefficient," commented the crystalline being, whose cracks had finally been repaired. "That's what makes it brilliant," Sarah explained. "Because human babies need so much care, their brains develop differently. They learn by watching their parents." She showed brain scan images of babies learning. The aliens leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Our children's brains are like blank computers," Sarah continued. "They can learn almost anything. This is very different from species born with pre-programmed knowledge." The hive mind collective buzzed excitedly. "Is this why humans can adapt to so many different environments?" "Exactly," Sarah smiled. "Because our children learn rather than inherit knowledge, they can think in new ways. They can solve new problems." The eight-eyed alien, now on its 14th notebook, raised all tentacles. "This explains why humans keep inventing new things. Your young aren't limited by inherited patterns." Sarah nodded. "And there's more. Remember how I said humans form strong emotional bonds during reproduction?" She showed brain scans of human parents looking at their children. The aliens watched in fascination as the pleasure centers lit up. "These emotional bonds make humans work harder to protect their young. We built better shelters. We found better food. We created medicines, all because we loved our children." The floating orb of light flickered rapidly. "Love? This emotional response drives technological advancement. It drives everything," Sarah explained. "Humans will do impossible things to protect their mates and offspring. We'll solve impossible problems. We'll face any danger." The quantum reconstructors, who normally reproduced by splitting without emotion, looked stunned. "You're saying emotions make humans stronger?" "Much stronger," Sarah confirmed. "Our messy, inefficient reproduction method created something unique, a species that combines emotional drive with problem-solving abilities. She showed images of human achievements, cities, spaceships, medical breakthroughs, art, music. All of this, she said, came from our way of reproduction. The long childhood created adaptable brains. The emotional bonds created drive and determination. The need to protect our young created innovation. The robot in the corner suddenly spoke, recalculating efficiency ratings. Error. Human reproduction showing unexpected benefits, requesting permission to update galaxy-wide databases. The conference hall erupted in excited discussions. Species that had mocked human reproduction earlier were now taking detailed notes. The hive mind collective was processing the information so intensely that they started glowing. One final thing, Sarah said, silencing the room. Because humans reproduce this way, every child has the potential to think differently from their parents. Every generation can see the world in new ways. The alien scientists looked at each other in shock. They finally understood. What they had thought was humanity's greatest weakness was actually their greatest strength. The conference moderator, still trying to maintain some order, raised all four of their appendages. Dr. Chen, are you saying that human reproduction's apparent inefficiency is the reason we're here among the stars? Sarah finished for them. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Not a single translator broke this time. They were all too stunned to malfunction. 3 days after Dr. Sarah Chen's presentation, the galactic scientific community was still buzzing with excitement. The conference hall, which had witnessed the most shocking presentation in its history, was now hosting an emergency session to discuss their findings. The results are clear, announced the Hive Mind Collective spokesperson, floating at the center of the stage. We must publish an immediate update to all galactic scientific databases about human reproduction. Sarah sat in the front row, trying not to smile as she watched various alien species argue about what to title their research paper. Human reproductive inefficiency. The secret to their success, suggested the eight-eyed alien, who had filled 20 notebooks by now. How humans turn messy reproduction into galactic achievement, offered the crystalline being, its surface now decorated with mathematical formulas about human emotional bonds. The quantum reconstructors, who had finally stopped accidentally phasing out of reality from shock, raised their glowing appendages. We have conducted extensive calculations. Human reproduction, despite appearing chaotic, shows a 327% increase in species advancement compared to all known methods. Sarah watched as the giant screens displayed their findings. The graphs showed how human emotional bonds, long childhood learning periods, and family units had accelerated Earth's development. Most fascinating, said the robot analyst, its processors whirring, is the entertainment aspect. Humans have created entire industries around finding mates. The screen switched to showing human dating apps, romance movies, and dating reality shows. Several alien species had already requested copies for research purposes. We've also discovered, added the floating orb of light, that human music is often about finding mates or expressing feelings for them. We've started a research project to understand why humans sing about broken reproductive partnerships. A small commotion broke out near the back of the hall as a group of spore seeders rushed in with their latest findings. Look at this, they exclaimed, displaying their research. Human reproduction has influenced their language. They have thousands of words just for different types of feelings about mates. The universal translators, reinforced after the previous failures, worked overtime to handle words like love, crush, infatuation, and heartbreak. Sarah stood up when the conference moderator called her to the stage. The hall fell silent. Dr. Chen, the moderator said, their geometric patterns shifting with excitement, your presentation has changed our understanding of species development. What looked like evolutionary inefficiency was actually evolutionary brilliance. The audience burst into their species' various forms of applause, glowing, humming, vibrating, and in one case, releasing celebratory spores that had to be quickly contained by the cleaning robots. Moving forward, the moderator continued, the Galactic Science Council has approved a new research department focused entirely on studying human reproduction and its effects on species development. Sarah thought about how she would explain this to her colleagues back on Earth. They'd never believed that human dating, love, and family bonds had become the hottest topic in galactic science. One final announcement. The moderator said, "We've received thousands of requests from various species to observe human courtship rituals. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to help establish a cultural exchange program?" Before Sarah could answer, the eight-eyed alien waved all its tentacles frantically. "I volunteer for the dating ritual research. I've already memorized several human pickup lines." The hall erupted in laughter, translated through various universal translators, as everything from crystalline chiming to quantum fluctuations. Sarah looked around the room at all these different species who had gone from mocking human reproduction to studying it in awe. She thought about how humans had turned their supposedly inefficient reproduction method into their greatest strength. "Yes," she said finally, "I'd be happy to help. But first, let me tell you about human teenagers." The universal translators wisely chose to shut down before that discussion could begin.